back. You're watching Politically Correct, and I am your host, Maya Hayakawa. Now, just the other week, World Vision, together with other key stakeholders, held a business and humanitarian partnership for disaster management meeting. Now, that meeting was dubbed Business for Impact. Basically, what the forum was about, it was one that looked for durable solutions using entrepreneurship among refugees for financial sustainability. UNHCR were one of the key stakeholders present at the meeting. I was lucky enough to attend the meeting. Let's take a quick look at how that went.
The session we have now is one which I think is one of the most important sessions, because we are going to be able to really understand some of the needs of communities, displaced people communities and refugee camps and the host communities around them, to give an indication of what can we all be doing to support enterprise in those communities. If we talk about, Catherine talked about the transition sort of to normality. And in normal societies, we want business to be thriving, because business provides the livelihoods, it provides work, provides dignity, and business provides the goods and services that societies need.
RCK is a non-governmental organization that works on matters of advocacy, policy, and legal development. At the moment, we working on reviewing the Refugees Bill. The Refugees Act has been there since 2006. But the way things are going, there is a lot of push within government to have it reviewed, because it has quote-unquote security lapses or gaps. And one of the things that we are really looking at is how to improve more or less the livelihood opportunities for displaced population, refugees in particular. And this revolves around work permits.
MasterCard, as well as the foundation, MasterCard Foundation. So there's a lot of activities being undertaken in Africa by the foundation. The Gates Foundation incentivized MasterCard to open a lab in Africa which would focus on financial inclusion, which is the lab we're heading up. So the lab in Africa is going to focus exclusively on financial inclusion, as opposed to the other labs that focus on the high-end innovation products. Over 3 years, we're going to employ 35 people in a staggered fashion, 15 this year, 10 next year, and 10 the following year.
From your perspectives, would some of these innovative solutions for payments we've been hearing about, will that help your businesses or help new businesses develop in some way?
Itasaidia pakubwa. She says that like what RCK has talked about would be very helpful. If they have a work permit, then they have freedom of movement and able to get their goods where they are needed at the right time.
These are very important things that we brought up, and especially the issue of permits and licenses. We can't run away from it.
As UNHCR, we do work with different partners, that is government, the private sector, and NGOs. And so our main role is to ensure that we create partnership within all these entities. Partnerships that are lasting, partnerships that have long-term impact.
Yata says she came into Kakuma refugee camp in 1997. Yeah, but she started doing business in 2004. In 2004, two of them, her and another lady, received support from UNHCR with a sewing machine, which they used to do business. Okay, the other lady is the one who knew how to sew properly, so she taught her. She was like a trainee, and later she got the skill also. He says there was water in the host community through a borehole that was done by the LWF, Lutheran World Federation, but it was not enough. So what they did, because a lot more water was put in the camp, was to negotiate with the leaders and also to claim their right that they were really the host community and should not be without water. So after that discussion, they were able to access more water from the camp, and that is what they used for their business. He says that the business has been very helpful because the people who are involved, the 52 young people, some were really getting into a lot of other illegal businesses and just being idle. But since they came into the business, they are being productive. And they also say that they have gotten a lot of support from the county government, who have supported with a loan, because previously they used to sell water using hard carts, but now they have been able to buy 2 vehicles which they are able to use to transport the water.
It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Mohammed. I'm a chairman of our business committee in Kakuma refugee camp. I thank the Kenyan government who welcome us here in Kenya. And also I thank the World Vision who also facilitate this opportunity to me. I came Kakuma 2006 or 2005. Life posed a lot of complication to me and to my family. And Kakuma was empty desert with no development at all. At that time, I had nothing on how to support my family members in order to survive. With my little money, I started a bicycle border. I was driving the bicycle.
Can you just repeat what business?
The border. Not motor. Motor is latest, Ivana. Motorbike. That is the technology, but the bicycle.
Opportunity is the word of today, because we've seen that the challenges that some of these refugee camps or displaced people are seen as a cost. Actually, if integrated into economy, they can become a real powerhouse and help to drive the economy.
That was a short snippet of the Business and Humanitarian Partnership for Disaster Management held at World Vision in Nairobi, Kenya. UNHCR were one of the major contributors to the meeting. I am here in studio, joined by the spokesperson of UNHCR, Emmanuel Nyabera. Once again, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Now that was just a quick overview of what the business forum was all about, which was quite eye-opening, I must say, for myself. And now, business for impact. Let's do a quick overview. What did you think of the meeting? Was it successful?
I think the meeting was very positive in the sense that people are realizing that we have to integrate the economies, the local economy and that of the refugees. Because we can't bury our heads in the sand and say that refugees don't exist amongst us. What we need to do is to see how we can benefit from refugees' presence and also how refugees can benefit from us. So it was more of seeing how we can work together. People have different skills, people have different potentials, and we're seeing how we can bring that together. The other thing is that it's crucial that refugees have to be able to fend for themselves. They have the capability. We have to empower them to fend for themselves, instead of all the time waiting to be given handouts from agencies like UNHCR, like WFP, or the other partners.
It's all about finding a sustainable solution, correct? Rather than having one that's, a quick fix,
exactly.
So to speak.
Exactly. We have to work in such a situation where everybody wants to be able to feed themselves. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to all the time open their mouths to be fed. Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do is all the time to sit together with refugees, with other partners, with the Kenyans, with other market traders, to ensure that we can come together and see how we can benefit from each other, as opposed to just waiting and saying that, this person came from Somalia or from Sudan, from the Great Lakes region, and is here and cannot sustain himself or herself, and yet they have the capacity to do that.
Now, during the meeting, a lot of commitments were made in terms of partnership and what they were willing to do to partner. Different organizations came in. Some came in for entrepreneurship training and skills training. Some came in to do some procurements and funding for capital for the businesses of the refugees. I'd like to know, what about UNHCR? At what level and what capacity are they willing to partner in this initiative?
I think one thing that we're putting, we are emphasizing on, is the need of people to work together and the need for us to empower refugees. We've identified skills. I'll give an example. We have something we're working on now called Artists for Refugees Initiative. Because we know that when people move from one country to the other, you have people with diverse skills. And we've identified very good artists who, for a long time, have just been there. Nobody knew about them. No, they have never been given opportunity to express themselves. You know, artists like expressing themselves. But now we're identifying them, and we're linking them up with artists here in Kenya. I'm talking about some of the leading artists here in the country.
Would you like to mention a few of some of the artists?
I'll mention a few. I mean, I've been happy to work closely with the cartoonists. I've worked very closely with Victor Ndula, who is the editorial cartoonist in the Star newspaper. I've taken people like Churchill to Kakuma.
Wow.
I've worked with Eric Wainaina. He's been to both camps, Dadaab and Kakuma. And now we are also working with Octopiso, one of the leading rap artists. So we are trying to see how we can work with artists to go and workshop and work together with refugee artists who are also extremely good. And in November, the first week of November, we'll be having an exhibition here in Nairobi at Alliance Francaise to try and showcase what they're doing together, to show that the people who are exceptional, they're found within Kenya, but also people from other countries, but now coming together to showcase what they can do together.
And that's also a way of breaking down some of these negative stereotypes and mindsets that we have towards refugees. Would you say so?
Exactly, exactly. When you go down there, like I keep saying, refugees are people like you and I, you know. So the artists who are out there, who came from, let me say, Somalia or Sudan, or they're like the artists that we have. So the idea is just to see how they can work together, you know, and also livelihoods. I mean, there's so much that they can do using their art. They can sell their art and get some money to sustain themselves, as opposed to just waiting to be given handouts.
And actually, that is one of the things that really stuck by me when I went to that meeting, is that I began to realize that there's a lot that they can actually do, and that, you know, they're not just helpless sitting there, you know, waiting for aid and waiting to be helped out, but they actually want to engage, and they actually want to make a living and make a life out for themselves. So I just want to ask you, what is the long-term impact, do you think, out of that forum and meeting and discussion that you had?
I think that discussion, first of all, was an eye-opener to so many people, yes, like you've mentioned.
Definitely.
That we cannot just wait and say that we have to get away of putting together the economy of the refugees and that of the country. We have to see how we can benefit from this situation where we are hosting so many refugees in one country. How can we benefit from it? We can't all the time look at it as a negative thing. Let's look at it as a positive thing and see how we can have refugees benefit and also the host community benefit. And this is something that, I mean, even the High Commissioner of Refugees, Mr. Guterres, is putting into place. He's saying that we need to all the time work on how we can empower the host community. How can we work in a situation where we can give host community help so that they can coexist positively with the refugees.
All right, now UNHCR partners with the government of Kenya, and together you all have been rolling out lots of programs. And so I'd like you to comment on this. To what extent would you say that the government is accommodating to refugees? In terms of policies, what policies are in place right now that are in assistance of the government? Of the refugee situation? I
think the government of Kenya has been extremely positive towards hosting refugees in this country. and I mean really give it to them. If you look around in the whole world, it's been so many countries have not been as accommodative as Kenya government has been, and people of Kenya as a whole have been. There are always challenges. There are always challenges. I mean, there are always issues of insecurity at times that have been brought up by the government of late. But even the High Commissioner came here and had a meeting with the President, and one of the things they addressed was how to ensure that the presence of refugees in the country is accommodated by the people of Kenya and the government of Kenya. Insecurity was one of the issues. And now we're working with the government to see how, and we already, it didn't start yesterday, it started way, way, way back, to see how we can work together to ensure that there is security in the camps and also security in the country, but mainly the areas that host refugees. So we give contributions like in terms of vehicles, in terms of accommodation for the police, vehicles, accommodation, and also in terms of communication gadgets, and also incentives to some of the policemen that guard the areas, not only refugee camps, but also the host community areas. So we have a program that's ongoing that we're working together with the Kenya government to ensure that it's a win-win situation. So refugees are taken care of, but also the government is comfortable with the situation.
Yes, and speaking of the government being comfortable with the situation, earlier on this year, we had a very controversial debate with the government, and the government actually threatened to close down Dadaab. What was that all about? Was it a step too far? Why the threat?
I would say, first of all, each and every government has an obligation to take care of the security of their own people. So that one is no doubt. And that includes Kenya government. So when they express their concern about insecurity, and they feel that comes from refugee presence, we have to listen to them. We also know, we also know
that the refugee camps are actually a breeding site for terrorists. Was that a valid concern?
I wouldn't say that, because I mean, when people come and seek asylum, you get people from different areas. You get good people, you get women, you get children, but in there you can also get people who are not conscious in terms of security, or let me say bandits. Let me call it that. Yeah, but then I think the only way is for us to sit together and see. And for us, all the time, we stand ready to work with the government to ensure that security in the camps is taken care of. And we also make sure that people who stay within the border are not a threat to security of the country. So we work closely with the government. We hold meetings, security meetings with the government to ensure that the asylum situation is taken care of in such a sense that it doesn't affect the people and also the refugees. Yeah, so whenever the government raises these concerns, what we've done consistently is to sit with them and say, okay, what do we do? And that's why our High Commissioner came and sat with the President of the country, and we've agreed on how to move on so that refugees are taken care of, but also we make sure that the Kenyans are also safe. Yeah, so I mean, it's more of discussions and getting aware of settling the situation in an amicable manner.
Now, I threw out to the audience of Politically Correct that you'd be coming on the show today. And one of the very interesting comments that I came across by the viewers was actually, why is it that it's only Africa where we have these refugee camps? When we look at other, European or Western countries, they don't necessarily have a camp per se, but are more focused on reintegrating the refugees and accommodating them in the country. What comment would you have to that?
Each and every country have their own policy in terms of taking care of refugees and asylum seekers. Some of them are enshrined in the law. Some of them happen because things just happen. I mean, when it comes to conflict, people just run. They run for their lives. So all of a sudden you're in a situation where it's an emergency. you know. So then you have to now see how to deal with the emergency. And that's why, if you ask me my own opinion, that's what now is happening in Europe, where the countries are trying to come together and see how do we handle the situation. In Kenya, for example, we've had the encampment policy, where refugees are supposed to stay in the camps, either Kakuma or Dadaab. At a certain stage, we had almost 14 camps. You know, when there's a conflict started in Somalia and South Sudan, then we had an influx of refugees, and we opened camps all over, some of them in the coast, some of them border with Ethiopia. But now, the government of Kenya decided to have only 2 locations, Dadaab and Kakuma. So, but slowly we are thinking that maybe we should look at it in a different way and see how we can allow refugees to live in urban areas. Because, I mean, look at it this way. I mean, the people who are skilled, like you and I. You know, I mean, if you've got media background, I also have media background. If I go to Uganda, I'd rather go and stay in Kampala, where I can get employment in, you know, in a media house, you know, so that I don't have to all the time rely on handouts. So we have people who can develop coping mechanisms in urban areas. So those exceptional situations like that, they should be allowed to stay in urban areas.
All right, one last question before we go to this break. You talked of some of the policies that we have in place. Can we talk about the loopholes that we have in terms of policy and in addressing this refugee situation? What are the loopholes? What do we need to do in terms of policy development to curb the situation? Yes, that's the question I have.
I think I will say that one is, which I think is happening to a very high extent, is just to agree that not all refugees should stay in the camps. The advantages of the camp situation, because you have people together, all of them together, so they have access to education, because we have schools, they have free access to medical care. At least they're registered, you know exactly where they are. So in that sense, that's positive. But then we have to have exceptional situations where some of them should be allowed to stay in urban situations. So there has to be a balance between the two. We have to have a situation where we look at some refugees who have coping mechanisms in urban areas. They should be given an opportunity to be able to develop themselves, take their children to school, take care of their families, where they go out and work and be able to take care of their people, as opposed to being confined to one particular place like the camps.
But in terms of citizenship, how easy is it for the refugees to get citizenship? What's their state, their state?
What happens is, I mean, we have what we call prima facie situation, where people agree that it's true that there's conflict. Somali, for example. People know that Somalia for a long time has not been at peace. So those people, they come and they go through basic registration, really, just very, very basic. But the people who come from other countries, they have to go through what's called refugee status determination exercise, where they have to be really, really, I wouldn't say grilled, but interviewed to find out whether their claims are genuine for them to be refugees. So we have lawyers, we have interpreters, we have people so that they go through individual interviews to see whether their claims are genuine or not. So we have those in place, and we're working very closely with the government now, and slowly the government is taking over refugee status determination process.
All right, then we need to take a quick break. When we come back, more with Emmanuel Nyabera of UNHCR.